Probably sit up.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 252 of the On Air Advocate. Where at the On Air Advocate, we look to provide education, support, and empowerment for all of those with different abilities, mental and medical illnesses, and their caregivers. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Tammy Flynn, and I am the host and producer of the On Air Advocate. And I am super excited if you are joining us here this early Wednesday morning, or whether you are catching this on the replay. As always, please share the love for the content that we are talking about today on whatever social media application you may be watching this from this morning. Well, if you guys have been following us this whole entire month, you know that it is American Heart Month, and we are in our Heart of It All series. And so I am so excited to welcome here for the first time Dr. Nicole Lohr. She is a cardiologist and the board president of the American Heart Association. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Tammy. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you and your listeners.
Yes, I'm excited you're here, and I'm excited you are here this early Wednesday morning. So we have grace for anything we do when it's 6:30 or 5:30 a.m. where you're listening from.
My kids are so excited. Like I'm actually doing something, through podcasts and through video, through streaming. So this is so have a little bit of pity on your listeners but I think we'll have a good time. And that's really the message that I want to convey to all of you is that it can be fun to actually change our health, empower ourselves, and learn a little bit about our heart. So.
Yeah, definitely. And before we dive into this, because Dr. Lohr, this is your first time here on the show, I would love for you to share just a little bit about your background and kind of how you became connected with the American Heart Association and started this partnership.
Well, I am locally grown. I've grown up in New Berlin, Wisconsin, and I still live in New Berlin. And so I'm really committed to the residents of Milwaukee and the metro area. I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. I actually thought I would be an endocrinologist because my brother was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 2 years old. But as I developed in my education, I learned that although diabetes is a devastating disease, it's truly cardiovascular disease that takes so many of us who have diabetes. And so cardiovascular disease and stroke became really something that interested me. And so I trained in cardiology, had 2 children, and realized that women aren't getting it. Not to blame women, but we weren't getting it. And we didn't realize that our risks were sometimes greater than the risks of our husbands, brothers, grandfathers, and friends. And so that kind of directed me to the Heart Association and the Go Red for Women campaign, of which I've been a member of for nearly a decade.
Wow. And, we always talk about that, women a lot of times, we preach, we have all these things out there now, self-love and self-care and whatnot, but, you're moms and you're working and you're busy. And do you really do those things? And are you recognizing signs and symptoms? And I don't know that everyone knows that, like heart disease is the #1 killer for women. Like, I don't know if people know that.
Well, thanks to the American Heart Association, we're starting to win that battle. We're about at half of the women in this country, if they're polled, can recognize that this would be a problem, but that tends to be generational. So I would say younger people aren't aware of the fact that you can be a woman in your 30s and have a heart attack for reasons that aren't in the traditional way. And so the other thing I would say is, kudos to all of the organizations that do great jobs of campaigning, and AHA is one of them now. But, we have it in our mind sometimes that cancer is going to be what kills us. And the reality is that heart disease kills more Americans, both men and women, than all cancers combined. And so if you put it in that type of context, it's like we may be making strides, but we still have so much work to do.
Yes. And so on this campaign, especially during this month, as we have these Go Red campaigns, what would you say are some super, super important things from some of those signs and symptoms to watch for, that are kind of like our red flags as women and things that we can really do to improve our heart health?
So I would say there's short-term red flags, and then there's long-term red flags. And the short-term red flags is if I start to develop symptoms of having a heart attack or a stroke. And let's focus on what really a heart attack is. So a heart attack, in the traditional sense of what most of us think about, is that there's blood vessels on the outside of our heart that feed the heart and nourish it. And as we get older, as we have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, what we eat, smoking, all those risk factors we talk about, what they do is really start to build up plaque and gunk on the inside of our blood vessels. And over time, what can happen is some of those blood vessels can gradually start to close off. Those symptoms are more subtle. So if I'm, walking every day 2 miles, and then all of a sudden I'm walking 1 mile, and then all of a sudden I'm walking a half a mile, and all of a sudden I can go a couple blocks, that's what we would call chronic stable angina, which is like, oh, I maybe get a chest pressure or a chest tightness, I get short of breath. And so that's something that we can look at with a stress test. So go to your doctor for something like that. Even crazier is that same lesion that we might find in the blood vessel, that may not be the one that actually causes us the very dramatic heart attacks that we're all worried about. And so it may be just an imperfection in the blood vessel that kind of causes all that plaque to like shoot out into the bloodstream, and the body goes, oh my gosh, I have to protect myself. And like if we cut ourselves, we have cells, that say, okay, we're going to clot. And so we develop this acute clot, and because it's so rapid and so sudden, that what we feel is like that really tight squeezing pressure, a sharp pain. It may radiate up to your neck, may go to your back. You might get sweaty. And so that's the traditional heart attack, and that's call 911 and get yourself to a hospital. And so that is the very dramatic symptom of a heart attack. But for women, and the problem with women, and what I want to stress today is that traditional way of having a heart attack may not always be the way that women get heart attacks.
Right.
And so, we may have like a lining of that blood vessel tear, or sometimes we'll be looking, or doctors will be looking for that, like I said, the narrowing of the blood vessel, and it isn't there because the heart blood vessels have changed in a way. And so women can be sometimes unique. And so what I don't want is for women to have symptoms and not get checked out because they're told, well, that didn't look like a heart attack, or it didn't look the traditional way. And so knowing that you have doctors that can tease out those subtleties and know how to treat you is really key.
And what are some of those, like we talked about, like the rat race of women and what we do and how we put ourselves to the side so much of the time for our families and stuff. And, as a mom of 4 myself, I'll do it later. Okay, I feel a little funny, but it's probably just the day. I'm just too stressed out. I didn't get enough sleep. And we give ourselves excuses for the ways, that we feel. What would you say some of those subtle indicators are that you may feel on a regular basis?
So that is an excellent point. And, I've talked to so many survivors, even survivors who have health backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And so I always have to double check myself too, because we do want to sometimes dismiss. Sometimes this stuff is scary to confront. And so, if I'm starting to feel anxious consistently, that something's wrong, I think that's a good indicator. It might not be your heart, but it might be. And we have to recognize and empower ourselves to go get help if we think something is off. Like I said, a huge key is having difficulty with your activities. So if you're an on-the-go mom and all of a sudden you're not able to manage what you're normally able to do because you just don't have the strength,
Right.
You're drained. That is to me a big one. Feeling, like I said, nauseous, or just, oh, my GI system isn't quite right, that can be a subtle indicator, which isn't, like I said, a traditional risk factor for men, but or a risk factor, a sign
Symptom.
or symptom, and really, feeling your jaw, maybe your arm, oftentimes that's like a classic sign. Oh, I have this chest pain that radiates down my arm. Just trying to get through your day and not being able to manage it very well can be a subtle indication something's wrong.
Okay. And, as we chatted about for a moment before the show, obviously, I would think over the last year and a half, we've all been under even that extra layer of stress. And I know myself, I took, because I have had some instances that I've gone in, I wore a heart monitor for a month and whatnot over the last couple of years. During the pandemic, I went in, probably it was back in maybe May, and I just said, I'm just here to get checked, because I don't know, every day I'm having, tightness in my chest. I'm feeling winded, all of those things. Obviously, it ended up being anxiety and stress and all of that stuff. But would you say during this pandemic time that women, that you've found that people are having more issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are really stressed and they're afraid. And they're afraid to, for a long time they were afraid to come to the hospital, right? Because the hospital was like the equivalent of there's COVID there. So
Right.
if I stay away, I'm not where COVID is. And we have unfortunately seen people that delayed their care. And the biggest message I can say to a heart attack victim or survivor is time is of the essence. We
Mhm.
have to be able to take care of you in a timely fashion, and sometimes those windows aren't there anymore. And so
Right.
if you, like, if you're starting to feel symptoms and they're increasing, they become more intense, or they don't go away like they had before, you need to be checked out. We can potentially open that blood vessel, and then your heart doesn't see damage. And so we're seeing patients who unfortunately didn't come. We couldn't open those blood vessels, and they have, areas of their heart that are now scarred and dead. And
Mhm.
that now translates into yes, okay, you're alive, but now the quality of your life may change because now we're trying to battle a different problem.
Right, right. So knowing to go in and get care. And now, those are signs and things through activity and symptoms that we see. What are preventative things that we can do, like through food and exercise and those kind of things? Where would you direct people? Especially because we live here in Wisconsin, right? So we like cheese.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, we just came off of a football season where, it's like our cheese and our beer and our sausage, they all kind of start to rack up. And so the short term we talked about. The
Mhm.
long term is really how do we make those changes in our lives? And what I want to encourage all of you is to realize that we don't make these changes overnight, and we shouldn't make changes that are so drastic that we really can't live up to them. And so, whenever I start people on their journey of changing their cardiovascular risk, it
Mhm.
really starts with a conversation of basically, how are you living and what's your life? What's your life like, and what are your eating habits? And so, obviously, the biggest risk factors we have are high blood pressure and high cholesterol, smoking, and in some cases, even pregnancy and your pregnancy history. So if you were to come to me, I would talk to you about, okay, let's look at what your numbers are. So step one is know your numbers, know what your blood pressure is, know what your weight is. Did you know that 2 out of 3 women are overweight or obese in this country? So that already, almost nearly 9 out of 10 of us already have one risk factor because 2 out of 3 of us are overweight.
Mhm.
High blood pressure. High blood pressure is another very, nearly half of this country really has high blood pressure,
Mhm.
or doesn't get it checked enough to really know,
Right.
which can be related to stress and diet. And then, like I said, high cholesterol. and smoking cigarettes, and then having like other diseases, like I said, high blood pressure or diabetes. So we sit down and we know your numbers, know what your cholesterol is, know what your blood pressure is, know what your diet is. How much are you actually eating as far as your calorie intake, and how much salt that you're including? And then we can have an honest conversation about how we change your diet. And then finally, how much activity. So, we recommend, 30 minutes of moderate intensity. So, if you can exercise for 30 minutes at like a really brisk walk, that's what we would consider moderate intensity exercise. Sticking to knowing your portions control is also key, because some of us think we can exercise our way out of weight loss. It's actually what we eat and how we approach our diet.
Yes, because if you eat the whole package of cheese,
right? Well, and this is the thing, like there's a lot of salt and there's a lot of fat in cheese, right? Which I love and I'm guilty of, and so it's like finding, okay, how can I put a little bit of that into my diet?
Right. And I know we had touched on different appliances and things. And I know we talked about the air.
I'm like, where's the air fryer?
Yeah. The advocate community outside of this page, that we had a big discussion about air fryers, and everybody had all these recipes and stuff. Do you feel like it's really been helpful for all these new tools that have come out to make eating more healthy? And what kind of things for your kitchen would you recommend that you think are great to have there?
That is an excellent question, because I embraced the air fryer in COVID because I have teenagers, and it was so I think the air fryer is key, because we're substituting something that really has a lot of fats into something that can be a lot more healthy. So my husband loves Friday fish fries. Mm-hmm. And I just like the thought of them makes me, it's like too much. And so we learned how to bake them in a healthy way. And so I would say even a toaster oven, learning how to grill. I actually think grilling is one of the best ways of doing this, right? Because again, kind of like the air fryer, we're not relying so much on on adding additional fats into the meal where we cook. I also love my blender. I wish I was, I'll be very honest with you. I wish I had the time to make all these wonderful smoothies that I see some of my friends do. But there's actually quite a bit of benefit into having those antioxidants and getting that nutrition in a different way. And so if you have the time, I would recommend that.
Well, and I think that things have been made a lot easier for us, right? If we can have these devices that we didn't have a long time ago, we all should be doing it. Mm-hmm. Easier said than and I know that I had some segments on already this month, just remembering the importance of going for your annual checkups, right? I mean, with your doctor, because how do you know these things, your blood pressure, getting your labs checked, all of this, if you skip being checked out every year or so?
Well, and right, but that really starts with the relationship you have with your doctor. There's a lot of stigma, I still believe, especially in women, of, we say something and we don't think that we're believed, or we don't know how to actually say what's wrong using the words that maybe a doctor or healthcare provider can hear. And so it's really important to develop a relationship with your doctor that allows you to feel comfortable enough to tell them what's wrong. And if it comes out crazy, like if I go to the doctor and I say, you know what, something's wrong because I just have this like overwhelming sense of doom, and it's like, oh yes, that's no, it doesn't work that way, right? It's like you really need somebody to take the time and start to delve in and understand really what's really going on, and maybe pick out some of those subtleties in your story that can direct you to really getting care, because it shouldn't always be just about the heart. It's really the whole person.
Right. Whole picture for that. And I know that just from my own research, I was so surprised, like through the American Heart Association, there are so many resources and tools there, from online webinars to even recipes,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So I know you're locally based here in Milwaukee. We do have an audience that's all over, the world. And so would you say going to your local chapter in your state, you're going to get the most resources, going to that main American Heart Association page?
I think going to the Heart Association's web content is probably the best way. I would say that the American Heart Association does have, in just about every major metro market, um, you know, like a local office. Um, they have a lot of those materials. I think what I love about being part of the Milwaukee AHA is really all of the community events. Um, and some of the more local issues. So if you are concerned about food deserts and really how do you get healthy food access to areas of the city, this is something that's important to our organization. Because we can talk about it and we can talk about what you do to lower your cardiovascular risk, but how do you actually do it? And do it if you don't have the types of resources that are available for you to actually accomplish it.
Right.
If I don't have a grocery store or if I don't have a farmer's market, where am I going to get fresh vegetables and food?
Right. So for each community, in the American Heart Association local chapters, are those in all the states in the United States? Is there one?
I haven't looked at the national map lately, but I know we have major like we have a Milwaukee and a Madison, and we can kind of like branch out into the Racine area. I mean, if you go on the AHA website, they'll typically let you know where the local areas are. And the American Heart Association isn't just great for education for you and I, but it also supports researchers like me who study how to even how to lower cardiovascular risk and the complications related to heart disease.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I thank you so much, Dr. Lohr, for being here with us early this morning on this.
I loved it.
And sharing with us during this Heart of It All series. Before we log off for this morning, is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with? Just another strong reminder.
So I'm just going to briefly recap. To all the women and men out there, be confident in yourself and be confident in what you know about your own body, and know that even if you're young or old, we can all make changes to our cardiovascular risk. And so empower yourselves to get information, to rely on your friends and relatives, and to support one another, because these are lifelong changes, and you can affect your children's lives, you can affect your friends' lives, and you can affect your own life with really simple changes. And so thank you so much, Tammy, for this opportunity. My kids will be so excited that I made it through my first streaming message, but
didn't
it's just
Yes. Well, we thank you all for joining us this early Wednesday morning here at the On Air Advocate. Thank you, Dr. Lohr, so much again, and the American Heart Association, all the works that you guys do. If you guys want to know any more about the On Air Advocate, you can head on over to onairadvocate.com and find all of our resources there. If you're viewing this from Facebook, you can head up to the top of this page, hit the blue button, and that will let you also into our private community. So with that, you have a fabulous day, Dr. Lohr, and everyone else. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.